Good morning. It's 9:04, Wednesday, October 15th, 2015. We call the Dallas City Council briefing meeting to order. Good morning to all of you, and we've got some important work to be done today. And I want to just say publicly, I'm so proud of the citizens of Dallas for being really good citizens, wanting information and at the same time caring about their neighbors, and and also making sure that we use facts and not fear. I feel that throughout the citizens that I talk to. So thank you so much to all the citizens. We will take our morning speakers. Ms. Rios.
Good morning. We have 5 registered speakers this morning. We have Eugene Ralph, Brian Lobdell, Michelle Imburgia, Kermit Mitchell, and Jamar Osborne. Your first speaker, Eugene Ralph.
Good morning. My name is Eugene Ralph. I live at 2311 Licorice Place, Dallas, Texas, 75217. And I have a handout for the council that I'd like everyone to have. Thank you. I want to speak this morning in reference to the issue of fluoridation in the water. It's been brought to my attention in recent months that this is a growing problem. I was not one to really buy into the argument, but after doing some research, realized that this can be a problem, and I think that as members of the council, it would be to your benefit to actually take a good look at it. We consider, over the years ago, we didn't see a problem with things like asbestos or things like lead in the gasoline or in other products, but now we've banned those things. We do all types of extensive remediation processes in order to keep asbestos from getting into the air when we're dealing with an old house and things like that. So we look back at the issue of fluoridation when it started back in the 50s. Basically, you know, it showed that we had 10% of the population basically was dealing with fluorolysis or whatever that is, where the tooth is being damaged by the fluoride. Well, now that we've increased the levels that we put in the water, that's gone up to roughly about 41%. And I think that is due not so much with the dosage, but also the levels, and that's what has to be considered. When we look at the toothpaste, on the little tube, it says, do not swallow. So when we're considering, we have 2 issues going on here. We have the issue of how it affects the tooth, but also how it affects other organs internally in our bodies. And we're always trying to figure out ways to basically get better at taking care of our health. And I want, you know, some of the minority members of the council to seriously consider what I'm saying here, because this has more of an effect on the minority community, being that most minorities drink water that's probably going to be tap water, more tap water than others, than other members of the population. But also, we also want to consider that even in some of the bottled water, there's fluoride. In many of the other drinks that we use, there's fluoride. So when we consider the amount of the dosage versus the overall level that's going into the water, that's something that we want to be considered. Now, I appreciate your time.
Okay, well, we're lucky tonight to have a great speaker that I call a friend, and he's going to come and talk about a lot of different things. I didn't ask him to speak about one thing in particular because I know he's versed in so many areas. He was a talk radio host. He is very active in the Republican Party. He has a group that I think is very cool. It's called Game Changers, and that's spelled C-H-A-I-N-G-E-R-S. Which I hope he'll explain a little bit of that. But I am very lucky, and I want to have him have as much time as possible to talk to you guys. So I want you to meet Eugene Ralph.
Thank you, Regina, for that great introduction. It is good to be with y'all again. I've been to a couple of your meetings in the past, and you know, I stay pretty busy in the southern sector of the city, so I don't get a chance to come up here too often, but except for business. But I love this group, Activists for Truth. You know, because everything that we're doing, in a lot of ways, is about getting the truth out in some way or another. And that's the large part of what Game Changers is all about. I am Vice President of Game Changers. We started this organization a little over 3 years ago to get the conservative message into the black community unfiltered from a strong biblical constitutional perspective. So that's how we look at all the issues. Basically, we take whatever the issue is, and we're looking at in the context of what the Bible has to say in reference to it, as well as how the Constitution how it frames it up. So, regardless, we don't shy away from any issue. We basically delve into whatever is on the table at the time. I am a field director for Americans for Prosperity. That's an organization that primarily focuses on fiscal and constitutional issues, but more from a fiscal idea. And I would say, simply put, the description of the organization is in the name: Americans for Prosperity. And that's what we promote: less government, lower taxes, less regulations, things like that. We focus, right now we're doing a major effort trying to find out who agrees with us on the issues. So basically, we're taking surveys, knocking on doors, making phone calls, identifying people who don't necessarily fall within a certain, they don't identify with a certain group per se. On a scale of 1 to 10, typically Democrats would say 1 being liberal, 10 being conservative. The left would be the people on the 1 to 3s. The Democrat Party focuses on them. The Republican Party would focus more on the 8 to 10s. That would be more the conservative group. And we focus on the 4 to 7. Basically, what we do is we, through a number of different ways, mostly consumer data, we identify these people based on their buying habits, things they watch on TV, those type of things. And we go and actually conduct the surveys. We try to conduct the surveys by phone. If we don't not successful, then we actually go to their house, knock on their door, and we leave them some nice little door hangers which tell them about a little bit about our organization. And we also have our website on there. I have some information here if you want to pass the flyer out.
This one?
Well, you can pass, well, no, one right there on the
Oh,
end.
this one?
That one there.
Okay,
Yes.
got it, okay.
Yes. And take the black one with you also.
Black
You
one
can pass
too?
it, yeah. And basically, it tells you about who we are and what we're doing, and as well. And so, what we're doing right now, anyone who wants to be a part of what we're doing, we welcome you. If you want to phone bank with us, we phone bank every day between the hours, primarily between 3 and 8 p.m. And you can do it from your house, on your telephone, on your computer. We have a very good system set up. Basically, you just log into it and you dial into a number, and it just pops up on your screen. You don't have to worry about phone lists or anything like that. And when you complete one call, it just moves on to the next one. And then if you have a half hour, an hour to work with us, you know, during the week, a couple days a week, works out perfectly. So if you want to do that, we have a sign-up sheet right here. You can pass that around with a pen, yes. And anybody wants to sign up to make phone calls with us, we gladly accept your help with that. Also, we're knocking on doors just about every day of the week right now. I have right now I have 3 field associates who knock doors, and on Saturdays we knock doors all day. So basically, we go from about 9 till about 6 o'clock, and if you only have a couple of hours, come out. Basically, you know, we take care of, we have breakfast, and then we make sure that while you're out there that you're not hungry. You don't want you to spend your own money on food and water, those type things. And so we try to make it fun. We have a good time at what we do. And the survey is always interesting because when you're going to people where you don't know what you're going to get, it's always interesting responses. I have a lot of people tell me that I'm a Democrat, but they're very conservative in their answers. As far as I'm concerned, what party they belong to is irrelevant as long as when they get ready to choose a candidate, they actually choose a candidate that actually represents their values. If you're a liberal and you believe in voting for liberal causes, then that's fine. Our conversation is probably going to be pretty short. But if you're conservative and you're voting for liberals, we're going to encourage you through information how to make better decisions. So basically, that's what we do. Game Changers, the focus primarily is more of information, education, and activation. Information from the standpoint of taking what people hear in the media, I would say most of the time, most of the things they hear in soundbite format. And we break it down, bringing it to full context. So if you think about it, a lot of what you're saying is so dead on. I mean, this guy, you give this guy another hand, man. I mean, I'm sitting there about to give you a couple of amens right now.
That's good.
You know, but actually, one of the things he talked about, I did actually do back I think it was late 90s when I first started getting political activism. I was living in New Orleans. That's where I'm originally from. And we had a mayor. You from New Orleans?
Baton Rouge.
Oh, okay. All right, homeboy. So the mayor of New Orleans at the time, he passed an executive order which gave domestic partnership benefits to homosexuals who were employed by the city. We strongly objected to that. I was a part of a group called Christian Conservatives for Reform. He had a town hall meeting, so we went to the town hall meeting. Most of the people there were standing outside with signs and stuff, so they were easily identified. I came in a little bit after they did. I just spoke to them and I walked by them. I didn't want to be identified with them because I wanted them to call me, right? So I stood in the back room. It was a packed house. I stood in the back of the room and there was people like little bunches here, little bunches there. So I stood away from everybody else. I stood by myself, okay? And when they started going to people and asking people, giving people an opportunity to ask questions, I stood there and I held my hand up. And I had to hold my hand up for a solid 30 minutes. And this is what I did. Every time this hand got tired, I raised this one. Every time this hand got tired, I raised this one. But I stayed away from everybody else. So the guy who was at the microphone calling on people, he saw me, right? And eventually he called me. Now, this panel was made up of about 9 people, and the mayor was one of them. And the mayor had not gotten one question. And so I asked, I said, look, this question is directed to the mayor. Tell me, sir, why did you pass an executive order giving domestic partnership benefits to homosexuals who work for the city of New Orleans when you know that the vast majority of the people of this city does not support that type of legislation? And I mean, the room just erupted in applause. Well, the first question I had was, why didn't anybody else ask that question? Okay? But, he kind of slowly got up. He was collecting his thoughts. I know what he was doing. Slowly got up while the room was applauding for what I said. And came up there and gave his answer. Then some guy called himself a preacher, gets up there, gets some convoluted answer to try to give, back on what the mayor says. Here's the deal. I did not go there for the purpose of hearing the mayor's answer or anybody else's answer. I went there for one purpose, to make sure everybody in that room knew what he did. That was exactly the reason why I went there. And what we're talking about is being activists. You want to be an effective activist? You learn how to get what you have to say articulated, just like you said, concise, bullet pointed, and hit it, okay? And never back down. And I'm a little bit more confrontational typically than I would say some of Regina. She's nice and sweet, typically, somebody calls me a tinfoil hat person or whatever, which I haven't had that happen yet. I'm surprised. I figure it's coming, But basically I say, okay, I like taking those people on because now in an intelligent way. And I like having a big audience, preferably, because I'm going to expose them for being the frauds that they are. But in order to do that, we have to, first of all, have our information here and be able to translate it in a way that the average person can understand what we're going to say, right? Because we're talking to people, typically, who don't pay a whole lot of attention to stuff. That is the reason why we find that the country is in the mess that it's in right now. Don't you find it highly frustrating, amazing at the same time, and an insult to your intelligence that we have politicians who run for office who count on the fact that you're going to forget what they did 6 months before the election, so they start doing everything cleaning it up right before the election?
That's right.
What's up with that? And I'm amazed that what amazes me, they actually discuss these things on the TV news. Well, he's going to vote for this, and he's got to run for office next year. How do you think that's going to play? Oh, by that time, he'll have straightened it up. Like, are you kidding me? He's telling you what he's going to do. He's telling you he's going to lie to you. He's telling you he's counting on you forgetting what he did. And then Even more so right now, we have organizations who are formed and say, we want to put this information out to the public, to let people know where politicians stand on the issues and what happens. We have politicians in Austin who are trying to outlaw that, trying to say the quote-unquote unethical committee, I call them. They call themselves the ethics committee, but they in direct violation of everything ethical you could ever think of. And they say things like, they have these, they're trying to put these laws forward where they say, well, we don't want you to report or give people a scorecard on our votes. In other words, your thoughts on our votes. But this is America, right? First Amendment, it's all about freedom of speech, the press, association, right?
And the TSA.
And consistently being violated by the very people that say they are on our side. So as activists, it's our responsibility to recognize and identify these things and deal with it accurately. And a lot of what, like I said, what we do with Game Changers is a lot of it is just basically getting information out there. You know, I did talk radio. I did talk radio in New Orleans, and then I dabbled a little bit after we moved here in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina, and basically still in New Orleans, but I think it was 2012, latter part of 2012, I was on the Lone Star Tea Party's platform doing an online broadcast. And you could probably go to Blog Talk and find a few of the archives still there. But I stopped doing that last March. I went on AM station. That didn't work out too well, but I was there for about 4 weeks on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Now this was in March. Now granted, I was dreading football season. You know, I'm kind of glad it didn't work out, but it was just a whole host of things was working against that continuing on. So basically we tabled it for a while, hopefully get an opportunity to start it back up, preferably on black radio, black AM radio. This was a Christian black radio station, and I was talking solid biblical conservative politics, uncompromised, and guess what? When the show was over at the end of the day, I had people waiting to talk to me who could not get through to thank me for telling the truth. Now, I was telling you, there's a hunger out there. There's a hunger out there for people to speak clearly and never back down on the issue, right? In other words, what is the frustration right now with the average person with the legislators? The legislators are, you know, trying to figure out how to say something and not offend somebody. You know, really? You can't really, if that's the case, if that's the standard, we might as well just all keep our mouths shut. You see, I tell people when I go places that I'm an equal opportunity offender. Chances are, I'm going to say something that you're not going to like. Yeah, and you know, if you think I offended you, then look at the guy or the girl next to you. I probably offended them too. So, you know, we're all in the same boat. And chances are you're probably going to say something that offends me. But we shouldn't be so ridiculously sensitive. And what I like to use time frames to help people understand how it is we got to where we are. Go back, say, 10 years, 20 years, and think about how things were discussed in the open square back then. You know, when we discussed whatever the issue was, before political correctness began to take such a stronghold on the mindset of the majority of American people. And that has been done systematically, intentionally, and very well done by the news media. Now, people like to say, well, you know, always blaming things on the news media, rightfully so many times, but what I say is that, in part, that's because we allowed it. The question I ask consistently, is it more of us than it is of them?
Yes.
So why is it that we allow them to tell us what we should think? Why don't we think for ourselves? See, I'm constantly encouraging people to think for yourself. My dad was born in 1960, and he used to tell me when I was a kid, he used to say, you know, we used to do a lot of stupid things. I think most kids do. He said, boy, think before you do. Think before you do. And you know, I remember one day we were walking home from school, and they had just passed this law that said you couldn't walk around with an open glass container, right? So all of a sudden, all of the bottles were slowly starting to disappear from the street. And I was just being, a little knucklehead. So I'm walking down the street and walking home from school, and there's a glass bottle in the grass, laying flat. What I would do is I'd get a big rock or a brick or something, I'd slam it and crack the glass, break the glass, right? So one day I was just about to have my hand up, about to do that, and this guy whose house I was in front of, "Hey boy, don't do that." And then my brother started laughing at me. He said, "Think before you do, boy. Think before you do." Made me so mad. Well, you see, the interesting thing is, to this day, I remember that story very vividly, because it's important that we think before we do whatever we're going to do, right? Whether we speak, whether we take an action, even before, as we process a thought, we should always carefully consider what goes into that, right? So we're encouraging people to get informed on these issues. The other part of what Game Changers does is education. Education from the standpoint often of correcting history, sometimes of teaching history. Because if we look at what's been taught in history, depending on where you went to school and the time frame you went to school, there's just a lot of things people haven't learned. And also, because people are busy, there's a lot of things people have forgotten. When Pastor Broden started the Constitutional Defenders back, a couple of years ago now, and one of the early meetings, I went to it, and there was a black lady sitting in the back. And so at some point, she and I talked, and she said, "So how did you come to find out about this organization?" So she said, "Well, the guy up there in the red hat invited me." She was talking about Joshua Fingerbinder from Arlington. And I said, "Okay." And so she said, "Well, I had to come and see when he told me there's a black pastor in the hood having a meeting about the Constitution." And I was like, "How old are you?" She was like, 45. I'm like, "Okay, so you went to school at a time when you were educated on how important the Constitution was to us getting our civil rights, right?" And she thought about it for a minute. She said, "Yeah." I said, "So where's the disconnect?" I asked her, "Where's the disconnect? How is it that you think that when somebody talks about the Constitution, it's a racist issue or it's a white man's issue?" And she said, "Now that you mention it, that doesn't make sense." And that's when she and I began to have a little bit more of a dialogue about how she had been brainwashed over the years. Herman Cain said it best when he was asked by somebody on Fox News, and he was running, "Why is it that so many black people vote liberal even though they're more conservative?" And he said, "Well, they've been brainwashed." And that was a very straightforward answer. Now, some people took offense to it. Once again, I say, why do you take offense to somebody telling you the truth? Right? Sometimes because it hurts. But the bottom line is, that was the exact correct answer. They have been brainwashed, right? You've been just conditioned to think a certain way. So if we go back to 1991, when, who was it? The big billionaire guy? It was, No, the guy that said he thanked the news media for not exposing the CFR.
Oh.
Okay?
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller. Right. He thanked the news media for not exposing their plan.
For 40 years.
Right. So if the thing is, and I get a kick out of these people that say, "Oh, well, you're just a conspiracy theorist." I say, no, actually. I said, let's break down what your definition of a conspiracy theorist is. First of all, when I'm talking about people conspiring, what is a conspiracy? When people get together and devise a scheme, and it's more than one person that does it, that can be considered a couple, right? So they can say, you can call it a cabal, or it can be accurately defined as a conspiracy. You have people conspiring to do something, right? And most of the time, those things they're conspiring to do is not good for the majority of the people, right? Okay, so the theory means that this is something that's not been proven. So a group of people who are getting together to do something, I'm making an accusation. There's a group of people who have gotten together to do something according to you that has not been proven. I said, okay, so let's take a couple of issues that you call a conspiracy theory. You said that the idea of sustainable development, Agenda 21, and all that policy was a conspiracy theory. I said, but tell me, or they changed the name of it. So now it's the EPA enforcing green energy policy or enforcing climate change law. It all is the same stuff. So my thing is, okay, here it is. If you can follow me along, and sometimes I have to bring some documentation or pointing to some websites in order to help make this case, if you can follow me here, you can see that we have a situation that, you know, just follow the dots here. You tell me where I'm wrong. Can't ever do it. So who's the crazy one now? See? I get a little bit upset when people try to call someone names because we're simply trying to bring out the truth.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
And see, I get a little bit combative about that. I'm willing to take it to you. You want to get, you know, being a radio host, you get an opportunity to do these things. You get the opportunity to.
You have your finger on the button. So
Well, no. Let me tell you, I've rarely done that. You know why? Because here's the deal. For every one person that calls there with a foolish idea, there's thousands of them that think like that. And most of them think like that because they haven't processed it, right? So I don't want to shut them down. I want to engage that conversation. I want to see if there's a possibility that I can change that person's mind before we get off the telephone, right? Number one. Number two is, if I can't do that, I want everybody else who thinks like this person to see how stupid they sound.
yeah.
Because I'm gonna destroy it. Okay? I've had some hacks call me on the phone, right? I mean, guys, man, they're dedicated liberals, right? And they got all of their talking points. This one guy, man, he could quote from the New York Times, like, you know, he said he was legally blind, so I guess he has a method of, you know, of actually being able to read the New York Times. But I mean, he's good. He calls there, he sounds like a professional. And he goes by the name of Elwood. It's not his real name, because he changes his name depending on what radio station he calls. Another name he goes by is the Flaming Liberal, okay? But his name is really David. And anyway, he'd call the show, and he'd just go on and on and on, and he'd just be railing, and I would listen to him trip up so many people. And I had a 1 hour a week talk show. So believe me, by the time he called me on Saturday, I was ready for him, you know? I mean, loaded to bear. And we'd engage in a conversation. And normally, you know, he's good. And he would be a little hard, but you know, the thing is, if you keep on cornering them, eventually, even though they wiggle, they still get in the corner, right? So the key is to make sure that you corner them and make your point in such a way that everybody listening to this conversation understands that this person is dead wrong. And then I don't know if this guy was his friend, but there was another guy named James. Now, James sounded a lot more sophisticated. James, you know, he had a great radio voice, dignified sounding guy, call up the show, and he'd throw you off because the way he'd start, see, that's what I would do. I'd go into a situation, and I tell people, I don't know, these videos keep going up on YouTube, how long I'll be able to continue to fly stealth, but the thing is I go into these meetings. For instance, Commissioner's Court. A couple of years ago, I went to Commissioner's Court meeting, and this was right after John Wiley Price said he don't want to hear from any white people. And so I went in there, and they were gaveling everybody who said, if you said a certain word, they'd gavel you, say, okay, you know, this is your first offense. If you say something like this again, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down. You know, so much for freedom of speech, right? So basically, I had time to figure out what I was going to say and how I was going to present it. So by the time I actually got to the point, I would be done. So basically, I spoke for, I guess, 2 or 3 minutes, and I basically just said something to the effect of, you know, you guys, I understand your concern about the fact that the public does not think very highly of you, you know, and, you know, we train our children to respect elected officials. And they give you, some of you go by the name of honorable this or honorable that. I said, but you know, respect is earned. And in order to have respect, or, you know, for people to give you respect, you need to deserve it. And so you should ask yourself the question, seriously, considering how you've acted, not just today, but prior to today, that led up to all of these people being so concerned that they showed up in this court to let their voices be heard, and you're not even treating them fairly. Do you really deserve to be called honorable? Do you really deserve to be even, in my opinion, even sitting in your spot. And, you know, about to say something else, and then I walked off. The interesting thing is, they didn't see it coming. You know, by the time I got to the point, the guy couldn't even get his gavel up fast enough. I was walking away. The point was made. So that's what he's telling you to do. See, the Delphi concept, yeah, basically you spread out. They do it. They do all the same stuff. Where do you think we got this stuff from? You know, rules for radicals. It's time the conservatives practice some rules for radicals. They call us radicals anyway, right? So act like one. You know, one thing about a radical is not just how you think, but you have to come to the position that what are you willing to do to stand your ground on what you believe? See, America was born on, I mean, this country was born on the fact that there were certain people who say, okay, that far and no more. This as far as we go. You draw your line in the sand. You come across that line, we got a problem, a real problem, right? Now, we're not talking about inciting any kind of violence, but we're talking about the situation where people have to understand where you stand, and are you willing to stand your ground for what you believe? There's things you're going to have to do in order to be able to accomplish that, right? I'm talking about in the legal realm. Things you're going to have to do. In reference to what you're talking about with the fluoride, you know? Just for on an immediate basis, you're going to have to maybe invest in a water filter to take some of that crap out of the water, right? So when you drink the water at your house, you can take it out the faucet, take all that stuff out of it, and then it won't cost you a fortune, right? You spend one time, buy the filter for $300 and be done with it. But there's things you can do in the meantime while we're working on this thing, right? Just today. And, you know, for the benefit of those who might see this on YouTube, what I'm saying here is my opinion, not the opinion of the organizations that I'm affiliated with. You know, just today, I wake up this morning, I turn my computer on, and I go to get in my AOL email account, and I see that the Supreme Court has allowed to stand the bad rulings of the appellate courts in reference to same-sex marriage, right? So, you know, of course, my day was a little shot at that point. And I'm thinking to myself, this is really screwed. Why? If I was to make this a selfish thing and say, well, you know, I don't really care about it. That's their business, you know, they want to do that. But it's more than that. It's more than just about me. And I'm just, even on a practical level, we look at this, the ramifications as we allow the homosexual agenda to advance, and have advanced over the last 25 years. We're seeing what used to be normal is now abnormal in the minds of many people, right? We have, all of my younger sons are born in the 90s on up, okay? And they, you know, I'm explaining things to them and talking about TV shows that give reference to understanding of how culture was back at certain time periods. TV done properly for children and young people especially can be a great teaching tool, right? Today, before I left, there's a new channel on on cable. It's called Aspire. I think Magic Johnson owns it. It's basically a channel geared to black people, but it's positive, right? It's what BET was supposed to be. And basically, it's old shows like Bill Cosby, the very first Bill Cosby show, from back in like the early 70s, you know, when he had a big afro. You know, and he's watching this, and I'm telling him to understand the culture, watch the things you're seeing as far as the dress and the things that people said to each other back then, to understand the culture, right? And then he says, then I have had him compare that to the Cosby show he saw in the 80s that led into the 90s, okay? Because these things like this are good indicators to help people understand how we are where we are and why it's not good. In other words, let's do some comparisons here, some honest comparisons of just what we're dealing with here and consider how we're going to move forward, but also taking into the context the way it's supposed to be, right? See, there's a right way for things to be and a wrong way. And we're in the midst of a whole lot of wrong things happening, right? And I mean, it's to the point now where it's almost, you know, Glenn Beck says your head's going to explode. Now, don't you feel like that sometimes? You know, I just have to turn off the news completely because, you know, you got Ebola, you got the problem on the southern border, You got ISIS, you got the economic problems, and then you got, the homosexuals and the cultural issues going crazy. So it's like from every angle, those of us who think like normal people think, which I believe we're in the majority, it's just, many of them are silent. Those of us who think like normal people think, or we're being consistently pressured. And so we're hearing people say, well, there's no confidence in Congress. Yeah, you're right, there's no confidence. Why? Because they don't demonstrate leadership. Everybody's looking for somebody to stand up and take the lead, right? So the question you ask yourself, when you get that opportunity to take the lead, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to handle it? I encourage people everywhere I go, those who come to any meeting that I speak at or I even attend, by default, you are classified as an activist. Once you get up off the sofa and say, I'm going to a meeting, you're classified as an activist. Now, everything else is degrees, right?
That's right.
The degree of activism that you're going to participate in, but you have now taken a position that sitting on the sofa complaining about it is no longer good enough for me. I am now officially an activist. Now, how do I become more effective at that? If I want to talk to the person next door to me, if I want to talk to the people I run into in the store, what am I going to say? You got to prepare yourself for this. It don't happen automatically, right? You have to train your brain. Get your brain in gear to be ready for the opportunity for somebody that you know and all the wisdom and knowledge and information you have to be able to pour it out on them, right? Think of your brain as a moist sponge, right? A dry sponge, it picks up things but not very well, kind of smears the table, right? A wet sponge is saturated, so it can't pick up anything. But a moist sponge can constantly absorb. Think of your brain as a moist sponge, and you are just absorbing information and processing and think about, how would I explain this to the average person that I come in contact with the next time I have a conversation about this, and trying to help them understand what I know. And when you think about it, the conversation comes up, and here's how you get it going. Acronym is FORM, F-O-R-M, Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Money. Get somebody to talk about their family. They love to talk to you about that, right, if they got one. Okay? They love to talk about their job or whatever they do for a living or whatever their vocation is. They like to talk about what they do for recreation, what they like to do for recreation. And they normally will tell you about how much money they don't have, right? So, that's right. So you think about it, you get a conversation going. Most of the time, you don't even have to go through the whole process. But just think form. You get a person to talking to you about what this is important to them. Then you pick from your brain, based on what I know, what information could I share with this person? And think in always terms of, I'm sharing information, right? I'm not trying to impose my information. I'm sharing my information because if I share it with you and you decide you don't want it, it's no big deal.
Amen, brother.
I'll find something else. Look, I got so much stuff in here, I can find something else that you're going to like, that I have to say, right? But like I said, most conversations, you run into people, 5 minutes? So that means that you need to be on top of your game, right? So you just share some information with them. And I told this guy I met not long ago, I met him at a function, and now we're Facebook friends, and we're bringing into the activism. And I told him, I said, look, man, get some business cards. He said, what I put on them? I said, put concerned citizen. It's whatever you want. Put your name, your phone number, and your Facebook page, because you may not have a website. Put your name, your phone number, your Facebook page, and your email address, right? And you go, Vistaprint, you get them for $10 for 250 of them, right? Get them sent to your house. So now you're official. You're an official activist. You run around, you talk to people, and you get in a conversation that is going somewhere. You say, here's my card. Why don't you give me a call sometime? And, oh, by the way, you mind if I get your contact information? Now, I have a point of contact, right? We're going to communicate, and I'm going to begin to educate these people on the things that I know. I'm going to share emails with them. Hey, check this out. Check this out. That's how we do it, right? We get people involved. We get them concerned. Find out what their concerns are. Help them understand the need to be involved versus sitting on the sidelines, right? Because sitting on the sidelines is what's killing us, right? They count on that. They count on us sitting on the sidelines, some people complaining, other people ineffective, And so you have all of these wars going on within the factions, And it's all by design. Some people say, well, that sounds like a conspiracy. It is. A group of people got together and conspired against us, right? Conspired against the masses, right? And if you think they're not serious about it, have some success and see what happens, right? Okay, why is it the Tea Party is so demonized? The Tea Party is so demonized because the Tea Party was effective. The problem is the people who were in the Tea Party, who got involved in the Tea Party, didn't realize what they were getting into. Most of them were novices, had no clue, they weren't activists. They were just frustrated individuals who decided to get up off the sofa one day. And then they got involved and they said, oh, okay, we got a bunch of people elected in 2010. We can go back to sleep. No, you can't. The work is just getting started, right? So what you got to do, that's right. So as a result, you know, you have people who decide to hang around, and that's us. You know? So I encourage, you know, if you're an activist, be the most effective activist you can be. Be determined. I tell people holidays are coming up, right? Thanksgiving. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to get a bunch of things like what I passed out today, and this might, you know, have other things on the page. And when people come to my house, I don't normally have to give them stuff. I got the stuff up here, but if I really want to give people things, I just kind of print stuff out and lay it around, and they ask me, well, what's that? I love when they ask me questions, right? Because when they ask the questions, they give me the opportunity to talk, right? I can actually answer the questions. And guess what? When a person asks you a question, they're more open to what the answer is, rather than me telling them, right? Because you think, the mind is like a parachute, right? It only functions when it's open. So we have to be always think, how do I get this mind open, right? And something else. People complain about the young people, the kids. I say what, under 35s? I'm complaining about it. Look, if they don't know the stuff they don't know, guess whose fault that is? It's our fault, right? Because we missed the boat some kind of way. We didn't get it in there, right? Now, granted, sometimes you actually worked hard at getting it in there and they resisted. So, I mean, you know, if you're one of those people, which you're probably in a minority, but the vast majority is people just assumed their children were learning things. Why? Because they're going to schools, coming home with good grades. Don't you love it when you see people with the bumper stickers on their car saying, my child is an honor student at thus and such school? I'm like, yeah, school's probably crappy. I guess just about anybody can be an honor student there. You know, I'm telling you, look, when my wife and I decided to homeschool, let me tell you how it happened. My daughter, my oldest stepdaughter, came home one day, and she was like 8th grade. And we're having a discussion, so we started talking about Social Security. She had never been taught about Social Security in 8th grade. She didn't know anything about it, right? I asked her, huh?
Or civics or...
No, hardly anything, right? I asked her, I said, how far back in history have you been taught? In the 90s. How far back in history have you been taught? She said, oh, we taught about the Vietnam War. Really? Like, that's not very far back. She didn't know who FDR was. It wasn't very long after that my wife said, I want to homeschool. I said, you got my blessing. So that's what we did. We did it for about 16 years. And so what I'm saying is those things actually led us into doing what we were doing, and we started trying to play catch up with the girls, okay? But when the boys came along, well, the boys, you know, we had more time. So we had time to actually take it and kind of stretch it out, you know? And one of the things is like you're watching right now is people like to tell you in reference to your children and say, oh, well, you know, people, they really irritate me with this. They try to tell me about when I was raising my kids when they were young. Well, you know, it's okay for them to watch certain things on TV. I say, no, it's not. It's not even good for yours, but I don't have anything to do with your house. But no, in my house, we don't watch all that garbage. Why? Because as a parent, I have a responsibility to protect the innocence of my children, right? You have a responsibility to protect the innocence of your children, those you care about, right? They get polluted with all this garbage, and you wonder why when the kids get 12 and 13 years old, they're doing all kind of things that we consider to be horrible. Well, you screwed them up. Okay, you allow them to get screwed up. So we have a constant battle here, you know? So we can't get away from the cultural issues. That's just something we deal with. So what my encouragement is this. For those who are the average people you're going to run into, just be prepared to deal with them. But also be prepared to teach the younger folks. The folks coming behind you, who might be 15, 20 years behind you, don't have the same understanding you do, because they went to a school that taught them political correctness, or under the political correct model, right? I tell people all the time, I say, you know, most of us have done our best to forget about Bill Clinton. But you can't forget what he did. No, I'm not talking about Lewinsky. I'm talking about the things he did and the policies he put in place that actually were designed to destroy this country. Okay? And he was successful. You know why? In part why he was successful? Because it wasn't just him. You see, in the 90s, think about this, under Gingrich, not just under Gingrich, but you had a lot of other outside players too. But during the Gingrich so-called revolution, there was a lot of resistance to the bad stuff that was being advanced in the culture. Where is that resistance today? The churches are silent for the most part, right? White, black, or otherwise. You can't find them, right? The preachers hide behind their pulpits, talking about, oh, I'm worried about my 501c3. Like, man, look, okay, judgment day comes and you're going to have to answer the Lord. The Lord will say, why didn't you speak out when they were starting an abortion clinic down in South Dallas? Where were you? Oh, Lord, I was worried about my 501c3. Really? You know what I say? I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, buddy. I don't want to be in your shoes. See, here's the deal. When it comes down to it, those of us who are believers, we have a responsibility to deal with the truth honestly. And that's, people wonder sometimes, I guess, because I'm just judging by the things they ask me. They wonder sometimes why I do things the way I do it. And I say, because ultimately what I'm doing is not because of what somebody else's, whether or not somebody else approves of it. I only have one person ultimately to answer to, and that's the Lord. And if he's pleased with what I'm doing and somebody else isn't, guess who's at a loss? That's where it comes down. Thank you for your time.